Okay, so I've been learning JavaScript the past couple of months now, and um, this is probably the second time I have started this JavaScript course. I've done some Node.js and some P5.js. I'm really enjoying JavaScript. The P5.js course really helped. My hair is just crazy today. So I've been quite interested in the variable functions in JavaScript. Uh, the fact of, it's defining symbols, essentially, is what I see it as. It reminds me a lot of branding from my background in marketing, like branding, rebranding, those types of strategies, giving new meaning to symbols or giving symbols meaning. It's quite fascinating the way it interacts and you create a logical construct with these things. But what I've run into recently that's been quite fascinating is some subsets of variables. I think they're subsets, and they are constants and lets. So const and let. Now, these types of variables, oh my goodness, like these work really well with how I see language, communication, meaning, marketing, and just the psychology of the communication breakdown in the world we have right now. Because the way I see it is we have several different types of meanings in the world that some of them contradict others. Like we live in a society, and especially democratic capitalistic societies, we tend to think that definitions are absolutes. And that's actually quite relative. So let me explain. So you have personal meaning, so personal definitions of words, terminologies, phrases, etc. Then you have social definitions, social meanings. So those are cultural, like that can be regional, ideology-based, culture-based. And then you have dictionary definitions, and most people tend to think that the languages that society uses are based, the way they use them, the personal meanings and the societal meanings are based off of dictionaries. But that hasn't been true for about 100 years with marketing, PR, advertising. Words change all the time. I mean, black culture tends to get stigmatized for this because their words are actually changed from on top without them even really having a say in it, and it's not really tracked anywhere other than Urban Dictionary, which is a giant collective way of tracking different meanings for the same words. Interestingly enough, when it comes to personal meanings and societal meanings, Urban Dictionary is actually better than dictionaries, classic dictionaries. So those are three of them so far, and one of the last ones is legal dictionary, like legal definitions. Now, if you look at it, the way I see it, you have social and personal definitions are like variables. You change one, you have the chance of changing another. Like if I'm a variable and you're a variable and I share my personal meaning with you, it can change your meaning of that word or set that definition, that meaning on a societal level. People who tend to be extremely gullible or autistic tend to struggle with this. Usually societal meanings of words require an influencer to change those of some sorts. But for some people, the only influencer they need are people on their inner circle. So in that case, it's kind of a combination of lets and variables depending on the individual person. So the let can keep it different where people can hear and they're like, yeah, that's what it means to you. We often see this in negative situations like debates that have turned into arguments where they say, well, that's what it means to you, or what it means to you is wrong. And that's where it's almost like a let variable where it can change, but it doesn't. And that way, they look at it like it's a constant that they don't want to partake of because it will break the way they're coded. Now let's look at another way that lets and constants exist in personal meanings and axioms and all this stuff for how humans interact. So so we have dictionary definitions. Like a dictionary definition is like a let where it will change an individual meaning. It can change an individual meaning, but an individual meaning can't really change the dictionary definition. The same is true for legal dictionaries. The reason that legal dictionaries are a constant is that despite what other dictionaries, non-legal dictionaries may say, despite what social meaning is, despite what personal meaning is, legal definitions are like a constant. It's even if your meaning contradicts that will break yours. Like it wins. It trumps you. It will break your code because it is that, global scope, constant variable. It breaks your code. You can't break its code. That's how legal definitions work. So it's a hierarchy. Even if legal definitions are different than dictionary definitions, social definitions, they always win. They are the constant. Now we can go through a process of changing those, but in a way, once those are set, you can't really change the legal definitions because it's kind of like it's a language where it is a constant. So it's not as even adaptable as dictionaries are. Meanings in dictionaries have more of a chance of changing than legal dictionaries. The only time I've really seen legal dictionary definitions change is to add more details to the definitions so they get either broader scope, but they themselves don't revert. They can't fundamentally change. They can become fundamentally abstract to the point where they're almost useless. But at a certain point, if they're useless, they don't change. They just become used less. And I find that quite fascinating. The only time I've seen legal societies actually revert legal definitions is literally when they start over. The transition of the British colonies to, the American colonies, collapses of civilizations, empires, Soviet Union to Russia. That's the only time you really only see legal definitions fundamentally change. So at a certain point, you realize that you can't really get rid of laws, especially fundamental laws, fundamental definitions. You can only add in exceptions, loopholes, which actually they make things more fragile over time. It destroys the integrity of the original system, having loopholes, especially loopholes to fix loopholes that were considered unjust. So amendments to fix amendments to fix amendments, it just breaks down the integrity over time. And that's why sometimes you just need a fundamental reset. And that usually doesn't happen the way it does in personal meanings, societal meanings, and sometimes even, dictionary meanings is happens way more often in dictionary meanings than it does in legal definition meanings. So that's why I look at that as the constant, not that it is the one that trumps all, but you have to look at it as it's a constant and it is a code breaker. But it's that individual code breaker. It breaks the code of for the people, by the people, when it can trump the people's personal code, when it can trump society's collective code. And I find that quite fascinating. So I'm really interested to get into JavaScript more to see how I can use functions, variables, and lets and constants to essentially counterbalance tools that, tools like language or legal language or psychology or even mathematics with code. We can make them more innovative. We can make them more adaptive in a way that works for the people, by the people, and doesn't lose that integrity, creating an anti-fragile tool system that is no longer about constructs, but is about collaboration, communication, and a democratic process, a more peer-to-peer democratic process with a way that can be audited from the outside, which is, I think, everything the Founding Fathers wanted and intended for the American nation that really has started to lose a lot of that integrity. So very excited about this path. Just thought I would share that.